Welcome, everyone, to our candidate forum for the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors District 4 race. My name is Kristin Connelly. I have the good fortune of being the president and CEO of the East Bay Leadership Council. I'm so excited to see all of you. We've been doing lots of Zoom events for a very long time. It's special to be in person. I have just a couple responsibilities before we get started. And so, first of all, I want to thank the organizations that are co-hosting this event today. We're so glad to partner with the Industrial Association of Contra Costa County, the Walnut Creek Chamber, the Pleasant Hill Chamber, the Concord Chamber, the League of Women Voters, together with the East Bay Leadership Council. So, we had over 135 people register today. Hopefully, all of those folks will show up, and it just really shows great interest. So thank you very much. I did mention it a few minutes ago, we have dozens of elected officials in the room. We're not going to take the time to introduce all of us, but we come from 9 jurisdictions representing cities, the county, special districts, and school districts. So thank you all elected officials for making the time to be here as we have an opportunity to hear from the 5 candidates running for the Board of Supervisors. Real quick, I just want to thank our sponsors for today. We're thrilled to have support from Western States Petroleum Association, WSPA, as well as, let me get this right, IBEW Local 302, and the Contra Costa Association of Realtors, the Building Industry Association of the Bay Area, and the Martinez Refining Company. So thank you very much for supporting this event. And the format today, we have a terrific moderator from the League of Women Voters that's gonna be here and do the moderating. She'll explain the format, but we do have 3x5 cards on your seats. So you'll have a chance to pass those in and up to the moderator if you have a question. And so we have some timekeepers. She'll get into all of that. So without further ado, I want to pass things over to our brilliant moderator. Stephanie, I give it to you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I have the easy job tonight. My name again is Stephanie Williams-Rogers. I'm from the League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley, and I live in Brentwood, so cannot vote in this election. Tonight's forum is, as mentioned, co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters, Diablo Valley, Contra Costa County Industrial Association, the East Bay Leadership Council, Concord Chamber of Commerce, Pleasant Hill Chamber of Commerce, and the Walnut Creek Chamber of Commerce. Your candidates drew lots for speaking order, and now I'd like to introduce tonight's candidates. Ed Bursan, Roxanne Carrillo Garza, Kenneth William Carlson, Deborah Allen, and Carlin Obringer. The format today will be that each candidate will have 1.5 minutes for opening remarks. Then we'll proceed to the question and answer segment of the program, in which questions pre-submitted by sponsors or turned in by the audience will be asked of the candidates by myself. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer every question. Personal attacks are not permitted. Statements made about other candidates must be in the public record or will not be allowed. I will interrupt if the answer is taking additional time. Questions will be submitted by the audience on 3x5 cards, which you should have on your chair. If you need a card for your question, we have Michelle and Vicky who will be able to hand you a card. Just raise your hand. You'll see them in the back coming up and down the aisles. Our timers are Kathleen and Annika, who will hold up a yellow card with 15 seconds left, and a red card when time is up for remarks or answers to questions. Now we'll proceed with the opening statements, beginning with Ed. It doesn't sound like it.
That should do it, yep.
Well, hello there once again. I'm Ed Bursan, and I'm running for the Board of Supervisors right here in Pleasant Hill, as well as Walnut Creek, Concord, and Clayton. I've been on the Concord City Council for the last 10 years, and I've been living in this area for 40 years. I raised my kids here. I raised my grandkids here. And, and for the question, when I moved here, I was just the same. You know, being in politics doesn't mean that you always lose your hair, but it does help when you can get some frustration and you want to tear some things out, which is one of the reasons why I'm running. We have problems in our community right now. Everyone is screaming about crime. Everyone is screaming about homeless. Everyone is running, trying to figure out housing, affordable or otherwise. These are all issues that are pressing 1, 2, and 3. We also have a problem in that we're dealing with a water situation while we're at the same time dumping 250 million gallons of water from our central sanitation in the bay right now. We have problems of equity. We have people that need food. Yet we have a situation where we have thousands of acres that need to be filled right there at the buffer zone at our sanitations. I'm going to try to do these things. I have done some of these already in the past, and I look forward to working with you and getting your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Roxanne.
Good evening. My name is Roxanne Carrillo Garza. I've served the people for Contra Costa for the last 22 years. First as a public health manager for Contra Costa Health Services. I'm extremely familiar with the internal operations of county government, various departments, and the budget process. For the past 9 years, I've served as Director of Healthy Richmond, now Healthy Contra Costa. This transformational initiative focused on the social determinants of health and is one of 14 statewide sites. I developed an organizational framework and a bold countywide partnerships to address pressing issues facing the city of Richmond and the county overall. I was raised in a working class Latino family. My parents focused on providing their children with opportunities and for a better life and the importance of education. Because of their sacrifices, I have a BA in political science and a master's in social welfare. As a single parent raising 2 children, I've experienced many of the challenges that our marginalized communities face today. These experiences fuel my focus to ensure that all of our county residents have a healthy and are thriving economically. I saw the inequities during the pandemic as we canvassed neighborhoods and listened to people's stories. The community feels a sense of urgency to change conditions around housing, economic opportunities, and access to health and social services. The demographic makeup of our county demands that we have a supervisor who can rise to this moment, and that is me.
We'll hear from Kenneth.
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Carlson. I am a police officer, or was a police officer with the City of Concord for over 29 years. I was born and raised right here in Contra Costa County. I've lived the majority of my entire life here, watched this county grow and develop and excel, and I want to continue that. A little bit about me, I also have served on the Pleasant Hill City Council for the last 10 years on a variety of committee assignments, board assignments across this county. I serve on the county's Hazmat Commission, the county's Airport and Land Use Commission, served on the John Muir Community Health Fund Board of Directors, as well as the board of the Family Justice Alliance and the Rainbow Community Center. So for me, there's some key priorities we need to bring forward over the next several years. First is public safety. Clearly, with 29 years of law enforcement experience, I bring a significant amount of experience to the table. But that needs to be done in a way that, one, the public feels safe, that we deliver appropriate and fair criminal justice reforms that bring equity and dignity to our public and to those that serve our public. Next is economic development. We need to support our business community. We have a lot of work to do in supporting our businesses coming out of the pandemic, let alone streamlining our businesses and building our workforces here. And of course, housing. Housing is huge, and we need to do more to support housing, provide for our homeless, build supportive and transitional housing so that we can get the homeless off the street. There are many opportunities and a lot we can do.
Thank you. Next, Deborah.
I'm Deborah Allen. As a small business owner, I first want to thank the business organizations that are sponsoring this tonight. They provided such great support to our businesses during the pandemic and are still doing that as businesses are recovering and still, suffering from the impacts of the devastation. I'm a leader with decades of business experience, someone laser focused. Oh, I'm not on.
Okay, how's that? Do you want me to start over, or what do you want?
Yes, let's.
Start there.
Yes. Can people in the back hear? If not, okay.
So start over or no?
Go. It's up to the timekeepers. What do we want to do? You guys ready? Okay, let's go. You can start from the top.
Okay. First, as a small business owner, I want to thank the business organizations and I deeply appreciate their support of businesses during the pandemic and as they work through the recovery from the devastating impacts. I'm a leader with decades of business experience, and I'm someone laser focused on common sense solutions to improving the efficiency of our programs and our services. I'm someone who brings new ideas and a whole lot of new energy to the job. My vision for Contra Costa includes these things: modernizing local government. We need to free up resources for jobs of tomorrow. Working with community leaders to reduce homelessness and humanely care for people in crisis. Supporting law enforcement as they risk their lives to keep us safe. Bringing new jobs to the county and retaining the jobs we have. And finally, advocating for the building of new housing that is affordable and sustainable. I will stand up for interests of the middle class and communities that are underrepresented, and I'll fight for improved public safety. My record as an outspoken, politically independent, common sense leader, it speaks for itself.
Thank you.
I'll focus on people, not
Thank
politics.
You. All right. Next up, Carlin.
Good afternoon, and thank you to everyone who organized today's event. My name is Carlin Obringer. I'm a Concord City Council member, former mayor, vice mayor, planning commission chair, with professional experience in the areas of public education, healthcare, and economic development. I'm running for the open seat on the Board of Supervisors to focus on community health, public safety, and resiliency. I'll build on my strong track record of local and regional public service to bolster our social safety net, improve our transportation infrastructure, expand access to affordable health care, create more local living wage jobs, just as I've done in Concord, and also ensure that our community stays safe while also expanding opportunities for more affordable housing. And I believe in taking a regional approach. As a regional leader, I've co-founded the Diablo Valley Tech Initiative to surface and grow the tech talent that we have right here in Diablo Valley. I've worked on transportation initiatives, even quality of life issues, like maintaining our beloved regional parks and establishing the Thurgood Marshall Regional Park here in Concord. And what I've seen is that we need strong partnerships with our Board of Supervisors to address those issues, as well as the more systemic issues of chronic homelessness, substance abuse, and behavioral health. And I stand ready to be that partner and would appreciate your vote for supervisor.
Thank you. All right, so next up for the next hour, I will read written questions turned in by you, the audience, and I'll rotate who answers the questions first. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer, and I will ensure that each candidate has the opportunity to answer all questions. Please wave your hand if you have cards, and this is a reminder, if you could please silence your phones. Thank you. If you end up needing another card, just raise your hand and someone will give you one. Thank you. All right, so the first question will go in the order starting with Kenneth, which is, with all of the people, jobs, and industries leaving California due to many reasons, what plans do you have to reverse that trend and bring industries to the area and bring jobs and people back?
Wow, good question. First and foremost, it's streamline the process of even opening a business. It really needs to be a smooth and clean process with transparency and, like I say, ease of access. And it's marketing. It's getting our word out there. In 2015, when I was the mayor of Pleasant Hill, I actually ventured off to China with many of the elected leaders throughout the 9 Bay Area counties in an effort to bring research, development, biotech, and new technology to this area. And that's really what it is. Let's get out, let's market it, let's streamline it, and make this area more desirable for our businesses to grow.
Thank you. Next, Ed, for you.
Okay, thank you. First, I seem to notice this census that we had that said my population went up almost 10%. I also seem to walk along our main streets and see nothing but line after line of help wanted. I go into my business license place and I see application after application. Yes, we've had some high-profile people leaving, and we've also had a tremendous source of growing of new businesses. Our small businesses, of which I am one, has taken a heavy hit. And I have fought for it and reduced their fees, and we need to have an ability to help finance, whether it be microfinance or otherwise, our businesses. But the reality is, we're moving forward. Don't be afraid of the past.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Deborah.
Thank you. So recently I spoke to someone who wanted to do a really large project in this county and had really worked on this program for 10 years to get to this point. It included development, it included jobs, it included some entertainment, it included some housing. And when I sat down with this person, they told me about their experience of going to meet with the county officials. And he said the first thing out of the one of the people he met with, the first thing out of his mouth was, "Hi, I'm fill in the blank, and I'm here to kill your project." That is the wrong approach. So we need to take a completely different approach in the county services. We need to do streamlining, but we also need to make investment in a department that will go out and really work to identify businesses and industries who will relocate to our county and bring their jobs with them.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Roxanne,
Thank you. So our businesses were the backbone of this county. They helped us get through this pandemic. And I also recognize that large employers provide thousands of jobs for our county residents, and that's critical. As your supervisor, I'm going to work with a broad range of businesses in an effort to build back healthy economic rebound for businesses coming out of the pandemic. It also means apprenticeship programs and the development of integrated systems for workforce pipelines. So our underemployed and our youth can actually get into jobs that are high, rates of employment, like health and biotech. I'll work with small businesses like the Chamber of Commerce and groups like the East Bay Leadership Council and East Bay Economic Development Alliance and others to remove the governmental barriers for some of the federal and state money coming into our county. I would like to work with the business community to envision a Building Back Better campaign as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll hear from Carlin.
Economic development is one of my favorite things to do. I have been working on this since I was a planning commissioner in the city of Concord, whether it's working with small businesses to help them cut through red tape. And if we start at the county, quite frankly, the environmental department where people have to go to get their fire approvals or working with PG&E, it's very difficult to cut through that kind of red tape. So I think that the Small Business Development Center needs to provide for small businesses more technical assistance, whether it's marketing, finance, cybersecurity assistance, even help trying to find new employees. As a mayor, for the city of Concord and vice mayor, I went down to Silicon Valley to let folks know about what we're trying to do at the former Concord Naval Weapons Station and attract tech to the Naval Weapons Station. I'm always also working to establish a public university research facility so that we can grow local living wage jobs right here. And I look forward to furthering the Northern Waterfront Economic Development Initiative. Thank you.
So the next question coming from our audience is, how do you see spending dollars generated by Measure X? And we'll start with Roxanne.
So, yes, Measure X. I'm actually sitting on the Community Advisory Board for Measure X, and I think a lot of the priorities that the CAB forwarded to the board were funded. There were several that were not, though. In the last round for the unallocated money that was before the board, there were many priorities that were not funded. Things like behavioral health for our communities that need it the most. People in the AAPI community, African American community, LGBTQ community. So I would make sure that we fund those in the future years of Measure X. I also feel like the Measure X funding needs to be looked at closely in terms of the impact of the dollars that have been allocated. The last thing I want to say is about healthcare. Measure X did not fund the expansion of services for all of our residents, and I would advocate strongly, and I will on April 12th, that gets extended to all of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Deborah.
So I think that the Measure X dollars fell short, or the allocations fell short when it comes to public safety. I really believed, and I think a lot of people believed when Measure X was passed, that it would help fund a lot more to both fire and the sheriff's department and other things involving public safety. So I will be an advocate for finding additional money for the body cameras that we need in the sheriff's department, and adding the additional officers that are needed, particularly in the unincorporated areas. I happen to live in one of those unincorporated areas, and we have been short on law enforcement for a very long time. In addition to that, the modernization of the county systems here in this county are critical. That's a spend that will actually pay back in the future.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Kenneth.
So I just want to champion Roxanne and all those who served on the Measure X Advisory Committee. They put in a lot of work and really kind of got slapped in the face. There were a lot more things that should have been funded. 29 years of law enforcement, and I can tell you that what feeds into that system are issues with behavioral health and addiction. And if those services are addressed, it's kind of like, and I learned this term thanks to some of the work I get to do, the social determinants of health. Well, there's more to that when it comes to if we take care of our behavioral health, our mental health, our addiction, and all these social services that have been neglected way too long, we're going to have less of a need for police officers doing that type of work. So we should have focused much more of our Measure X dollars into social services and support systems that protect and are keeping people from being fed into our criminal justice systems.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Carlin.
Thank you. I just want to thank all those who worked on Measure X, because before that passed, Contra Costa was the only county in the Bay Area that did not have a revenue generating measure like that. And those dollars are going to be really helpful, but you have to take a look and see $40 million is going toward the hospital, but there needs to be more for clinics, for community clinics, for behavioral health, and for public safety, as well as an area that we haven't talked about, which is childcare. And we know that women have left the workforce in droves because they've had to go and take care of children as well as family members. And so that's an area where I'd really like to see us allocate some more Measure X dollars to help bolster our childcare facilities, because then that is going to enable our economy to grow further. And so I think that Measure X was a great start, but I think that we're going to have to do more if we really want to provide the supports that our social safety net is mandated to provide.
You. Next, we'll hear from Ed.
One of the most important things about allocation of funds is that when we create a body of advisors from the community, we should listen to them. The other thing is, we know and we listen to them, and one of the emphasis is about prevention. As Ken has mentioned, it is so much easier to deal with mental health issues while people are still in their homes and have surrounding support systems to support them. before they burn out everything at home and we have to deal with them on the street. We also know that government tends to take money from A, empty it, and then say, oh, we're going to use safety money to go here. And oh, guess what? We have the same amount now. This is the kind of stuff we need to watch from government. On the Board of Supervisors, we have to be very careful to oversight to make
Thank
sure
you.
that we apply what we do.
Next question from the audience is, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing Contra Costa County? And we'll start with Deborah.
Well, I think lots of them, but the biggest challenge really is balancing our jobs to our housing and to our transportation systems that we're providing. If we can work harder at the economic development and bring more, and I'm talking about really high-paying, middle-class jobs to this county, we actually can solve much of our own transportation problem just simply by keeping people from leaving the county every morning to go to work. And so I think that's the biggest challenge, really, is that balance. Other counties in the region have a much higher percentage of jobs to housing, and we need to work on that.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Carlin.
Thank you. So there are a number of challenges, but whenever I look at local polls, news stories, people are deeply concerned about those without housing, those who are unsheltered, those who are housing insecure. And so that is one of my motivations for running for supervisor. In the city of Concord, we have worked hard over the past year and a half to stand up our own case management team, including with a behavioral health clinician. Now we're going to have a housing czar, homelessness czar, for lack of better terms, who is going to exist because there is not connectivity between what a city like the city of Concord is doing and what is happening at the county level with the Council on Homelessness, H3, the Substance Abuse Council, and then you have regional initiatives like All Home. And so I think it's really important for a supervisor, myself, when I come into office, I look forward to following the A3 model, where we bring together folks from public safety, from the private sector, the nonprofit world, law enforcement, cities and counties to address this issue. Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Ed.
If you want to know what the number one problem is, you talk to the people. For the last 3 months, one word comes out again and again: crime. In fact, when I asked for the top 5, it was crime, 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 maybe roads. Crime is the number one issue on everyone's mind. Both the fact that there is more crime, there is more awareness of crime, and there is less of a sense that we are getting justice. If you check on Nextdoor, you got crime coming to your doorstep every day on that. It used to be that would be lost cats, dogs, and hamburger recipes. Now it's catalytic converters, porch pirates, and the rest. Crime is the number one issue, and accountability for those who are doing it, and restoration or a possibility to redirect the offenders in a different direction. Crime is the number one issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Roxanne.
So I think there's 3 priorities in this county. One is health. As we come out of this pandemic, I led the effort to reach families and actually hear their stories of how the pandemic impacted them. And we actually are preparing to have residents meet with the health department and talk about what those experiences were like and how to shift the way our health providers respond to a crisis like that. We went out into neighborhoods that were under-vaccinated and provided education and outreach, but we also were able to see all the other inequities that the pandemic revealed, right? Which we knew were there before. So I think housing is another priority that we need to look at. Measure X passed a housing trust fund, and we need to move all of the elements of that forward. And then the third issue is fiscal accountability. I think the county is long overdue in being more transparent in how their decisions get made at the board level. We have gone many times to demand answers and haven't heard them. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Kenneth.
So I bet you think I'm going to say public safety. And the reality is crime is an issue, but I will say that the work we've done in Pleasant Hill, our crime statistics are actually down. And that's a great thing. So what I want to talk about is housing, and we're in a unique opportunity, and this is housing across the board, whether it's our unsheltered, unhoused. We have, we all curse the pandemic, but the reality is it brought us some benefits, and there's surpluses in the state budget, and there is money available to us. The governor has proposed $8 billion in housing. So $1.5 billion for behavioral health and housing support and services, $500 million for relocation from encampments to housing, and all kinds of things. So we need to aggressively pursue state funding and get housing built and get our people off the street. And I think that should be and will be my priority.
Thank you. All right, so on to the next question coming from our audience is, what criminal justice reforms do you support? And we'll go with Ed.
What I would like to do is bring justice back to our doorstep. Bring it local. We need to be able to have local courts that are empowered and are able to follow up and enforce some of our laws, especially the local ones, the small ones. We have to be able to get after the porch pirates. We need to be able to take care of the catalytic converters. We need to be able to take care of the trespassers. These are things that need to be done. We have to show accountability to the offender, and we have to show justice for our victims. We need also, possibly a restructure. We need to be able to maybe take all those cases, instead of having a jury trial, we never had a jury trial for a speeding ticket. And right now, there's more consequences to getting a speeding ticket than it is for robbing a six-pack of beer from the local store. This has got to stop.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Kenneth.
It seems like you're picking on me, but if anybody has an hour when this is all said and done, I'll be outside. But really, there's so much we can do. 29 years in law enforcement. I was everything from a street lawyer to a civil litigant to a social worker to a mental health professional, let alone being a cop. The reality is we need to realign our services. We need to take mental health out of the police officers' hands. They're not trained for it. I probably had 40 hours of training in mental health and communicating with the mentally ill over 30 years. Not enough. As well as the social issues, working with our homeless and providing social services, being, in some respects, a surrogate parent for children, to parents who have abdicated their responsibilities. So we realign those services, take them out of the hands of our police officers, and guess what? They're out doing police work. They're out there actually investigating crimes, suppressing crimes, proactively approaching those things. And then, of course, we need to make sure that they're trained in equity and treating people with dignity.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Deborah.
Let's go.
So our county has been slow, really, to address this mental health crisis, that now really the crisis is just completely out of control at this point, it seems. And, so you asked about criminal justice reforms. I agree with some of what Ken said about the things on the street and how we deal, how police officers have been pretty much asked to do the mental health work themselves. That hasn't been fair. They've been blamed for it. But at the criminal justice level, we need to continue to prosecute lower level crimes, but we need to also sort of create pathways once people are prosecuted for those crimes. We certainly shouldn't be not prosecuting, but when we create pathways, we need to be screening for mental health crisis, mental health deficiencies, and are people really just drug dependent, and that's what's creating their problems.
Next, we'll hear from Carlin.
So I'm really proud of the work that we've been doing in the city of Concord, that I've been a part of as a council member, as well as professionally, to help host and stand up the Miles Hall Community Crisis Hub A3, the non-police response to mental health calls for service, working to destigmatize and decriminalize behavioral health challenges. And we also have created, modeled after the
small team that the county has. We have our own mental health evaluation team, and I'm proud that in Concord we are going to be the hub for all of the county's mental health teams, so that anyone who needs a non-police response to mental health calls for service can receive it. And I think that we need to ensure that that gets fully funded into perpetuity. Also, the City of Concord, myself as a council member, we have expressed support for standing up the new community court system, the Neighborhood Restorative Partnership Program, where it's going to be a community-based program in partnership with our police department.
Thank you. I have the hard job of cutting you guys off, so no hard feelings, and I apologize. But we'll go to Roxanne next.
Thank you. I mean, everyone in our district deserves to feel safe in their neighborhoods and community. I think we can all agree on that. But I do, back to what Ken started us out with, in terms of public safety discussion, it really needs to be broadened in terms of the social determinants of why crime happens in the first place, right? So if you actually implement an equitable approach to healthcare, education, housing, and job opportunity, that's what leads to crime. The crime has gone down in both Pleasant Hill, and according to the DA's office, it's actually gone down in Concord. So in 2019, there was 316 crimes, and in October 2021, there was 35%, or 211 crimes. So I think, this sort of, we're in an election cycle, and so the fear around crime rears its head. But I think criminal justice reform really needs to be at the top of our mind. How do we actually work with our sheriff department to be more accountable? And I've called for a sheriff community oversight commission.
Thank you. All right. So the next question from our audience is, what is your plan to address food insecurity in the county? And we'll start with Carlin.
Thank you. Well, it's very concerning, and I think we saw during the pandemic how many people were going to our nonprofit partners to receive food. And I just want to say thank you to the Food Bank of Contra Costa County, the Monument Crisis Center, and many others who jumped into action whenever the pandemic started. And so we need to continue to support those nonprofit organizations, but we also need to understand in the first place why we have 40% of children in this county who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. That's almost half of the children in our county, and that is wrong. So I look forward to, again, working to see how we can stabilize people, for example, with their housing situations. I think we need to build more deeply affordable housing so that people don't have to choose between buying food and paying rent or their mortgage. I think we need to engage in more education and job programs so that, again, we can elevate people out of poverty so that they don't have to choose.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Roxanne.
So food insecurity definitely played out during the pandemic. We saw people in lines at our food banks as well as our schools. And I think actually our schools provided a much needed service for our community. Even during the pandemic, you had principals and teachers lined in front of their schools handing out food to those children. I think that there needs to be, particularly in unincorporated areas or communities that don't have access to fresh food, there needs to be much more attention to that. We tend to have a lot of fast food on every corner, particularly in communities of color, rather than having small markets that have fresh food available. And I think we need to partner with the community to figure out what that looks like. In many parts of the county, there are community gardens and farms, and communities really taking into account what their history around food has been. And then I think policies often are what are a barrier for people to access food. So whether or not people have eligibility to SNAP and other programs, we need to make sure to remove those barriers for our families. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Kenneth.
Well, when we talk about healthcare, we all think of money as well and how expensive our healthcare is. And this is one of the areas where we can actually reduce the cost and invest in a better source. So if we spend the time, the energy, and I've got to champion again our nonprofit partners who have done a tremendous job, especially during this pandemic, seeing to this need. But it's expanding our CalFresh programs. It's expanding some of our nonprofit partners, the Family Harvest Farm that John Muir has got going. The John Muir Land Trust, sorry. But it is. If we address these social determinants of health and invest our money there, the cost is lower, the benefit is higher because we're feeding our community, we're feeding those in need, and we're preventing them from falling into ill health and then having to access our healthcare systems. So again, we really need to address all our social determinants of health, not just food insecurity, transportation, housing, all of these things that lead to poor health outcomes and criminal behavior as well.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Ed.
As a Rotarian, I set up a program of gleaning that has brought 26 tons of food to the pantries here. This morning, I was at the Contra Costa Sustainable Farm, also known as Aglantis. On 10 acres of land, buffer land, they provided 500,000 pounds of food. We have 5,000 acres of buffer land around our sanitation facilities in this county. If we can take the same effort on those 10 acres with the 5,000, we could feed hundreds of thousands of people. We can also take our kids and make them be aware of what it is to be farming, and science begins at farms. So we have the capability, very simple. We can grow more of our own. And this is the kind of thing we need to
Thank
push
you.
our special districts to do.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Deborah.
Thank you. I take a more global approach to the food insecurity issues. I think maybe some of this was mentioned, but when we can improve economic development, when we can improve the general lives of everyone in the county, they are working, they are healthy, they have both physical and mental health. When we can start to have better programs for those things, better programs for addiction services, better education programs, when all of that improves, I think the food insecurity improves as well. I prefer that we not focus on us feeding people, but us working to make sure that people can feed themselves.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next question from our audience is, as supervisor for District 4, what will you do to support families who are at risk of eviction and homelessness now that state assistance and protections are winding down? And we'll start with Kenneth.
You have time to write it down. The same thing we're doing right here in Pleasant Hill. I mean, we're focusing in our housing, but we're focusing in on affordable housing and on workforce housing, keeping our workforce in our community. And just in the last few months, we actually approved 484 units of workforce housing that those residents that would be eligible to move there and or currently live there, the 55% that currently live there would qualify and would immediately see a $100 to a $600 a month rent decrease. And that still leaves us several units for workforce housing. We're also focusing in on our seniors. So providing the housing, we have 80 units coming online for affordable senior housing next to a service hub that's going to provide them the services and support they need. So we need to focus in on the housing stock inventory and affordable so that those in our communities can live, work, and play right here.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Deborah.
Look, if we want affordable housing, we have to be able to build it affordably. I spent my whole career in the housing and construction industries. I was a finance person. I know how it's built, I know it's financed, and I know how it doesn't get built, and I know how the projects get killed. Number one, we're killing too many projects that could have been built over really the last decade in this county. And so we've got to start to streamline the process of housing starts. We've got to make it more affordable to build. And that may start with labor, looking at how labor gets contracts, how we support our small businesses. Many of our small construction business have simply packed up and left here. Okay, they're just not here. And so if we want to build something, we've got to bring people from out of the area. I know this firsthand. I am a construction company owner and have been in the past.
Thank
There's
you.
a lot more.
Next, we'll hear from Ed.
Affordable housing plans are not going to help you from being evicted tonight. I'm the only one on this dais who has supported both rent control and reasonable approaches to the issue of eviction 5 years ago. I got the number of 1 to 4 in the Concord Council because I was the only one supporting this 5 years ago. I'm also, I think, the only one over here who has voted for full just cause eviction regulations. I've also supported rent strikes, and I know that while I was supporting that, we had tenants associations coming and screaming at the rest of my colleagues. Eviction is a now problem. It's not something that you solve by plans.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Roxanne.
Great. So as a Measure X Community Advisory Board member, we heard a lot from housing experts, and there's some promising practices that I would support. And I mentioned the local housing trust fund, and the particular innovations there would be providing fund assistance for tenants, making sure that unsheltered residents have transitional housing, and acquisition and preservation and rehab of affordable housing, and affordable housing for people with developmental disabilities, community land trust, and permanent supportive housing. So those are the main things that I would support. And I also think it's important to engage local residents, unhoused individuals, urban planners, housing developers, all in talking about the solution for effective housing developments that are so critically needed. According to Measure X, there's a need for 32,000 affordable housing rental units. And to meet that demand, we need to make sure that there's an amount for very low and low income as well as middle income.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Carlin.
It's about partnerships with the county, partnerships with the state. I have been in support of SB 1482 since it went into law on January 1, 2020, which is statewide rent control and just cause eviction. And I have worked to ensure that that law is followed in the city of Concord. At the same time, when I was serving as mayor in 2019, we allocated $7.8 million of our $14 million in affordable housing funds to work with resources for community development to build a 100% affordable housing project, not workforce housing, deeply affordable, $660 per month studio apartments. And they have taken those funds and cobbled them together with county funds and state funds and federal funds. And hopefully this year it'll come out of the ground. And so we need to work with the county to work with our cities as well as our faith partners. I'm talking with churches right now, trying to identify churches in Concord, and there's one at least in Walnut Creek, one in Clayton, that are willing to partner on macro homes and affordable housing for seniors. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question from the audience is, get your pens ready. Please discuss how you will partner with the community and ensure community input in developing county policies. And we'll start with Kenneth.
That's you.
Okay. We're a team. No, it really is just being open, transparent, and accessible. Everything we do, we represent our communities, we represent our constituents. It has to be done in the light of day, and it has to be done as a partnership. We face challenges in Pleasant Hill every time we bring a housing development forward. And it's not that our community doesn't want to build housing, but they get a little nervous. And so, you know, I personally have advocated for engaging our community more, bringing those forward. Even when a developer comes to us, you want to propose something, have you done your outreach to the community? Have you done it? I shouldn't be doing it for you. You need to be out there doing it. So it is. It's working in the light of day. It is being open and transparent, and it is education and outreach on my part as well as the county's part.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll hear from Ed.
Gee, I want to thank whoever asked the question because I get to do a little commercial. For the last 13 years, I've run a website called, and I'll write it down, www.pulseofconcord. And in it, it's been coming out, like I said, for 13 years. It asks all the questions that you want to ask, as well as topics. And it may be included as something as simple as, shall we ban roosters, which, by the way, had an overwhelming support, or whether we would, how do we want to use our skate park to be a homeless tent factory or tent encampment. I've done this. I can maintain a standing offer for anyone to sit with me at Pete's Coffee at Oak Grove and Treat, another commercial, to discuss anything. There is not a single person who has ever asked me to sit down and talk to them that I haven't done so and bought the coffee.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Deborah.
It's incredibly important to partner with our communities on county policy. But we can't let that concept of partnering with the community turn into only partnering with a small group of people who are very loud. I would say to you, my work at BART, there are a lot of community organizations that have seats at the table on everything, every policy that we implement at BART. They're very loud, they have paid people who come to the table, but there are also a whole lot of community members out there who just send me emails when they don't like something, send me a Facebook message or something similar, and they need to be represented too. So I have a tremendous amount of experience for 5 years of actually listening to the community, but all of the community. And it is important to balance the needs of some against the needs of other, and they oftentimes are not the same.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Roxanne.
Well, I'm going to have to lean in on this one. So that's how I came to this county. I actually started with the health department, and I organized residents across 6 neighborhoods to really look at what health policy means to them. And with that, we were able to really comment and move policy at the county level around a host of issues. Transportation, whether or not residents could get to the county hospital. Water quality, whether or not water quality in Bay Point was good for the residents and how we could work with the water quality treatment plant. Environmental justice, how we could hold town hall meetings in West County to really listen to the community about what was bothering them on the fence line and how we could work with industry to make them feel safer. Measure X, I look over to my left, and Measure X was a great model for that. Bringing people together to talk about issues, hearing from people from across our county, and then actually having the board listen to what the community has to say. And looking at a people's budget is a great example of how some localities have done that.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Carlin.
Community engagement should be a full-time part of being an elected official supervisor. And I'll just give you one example of how I engaged with community to make a very big decision. So in 2018, we were being asked to put a full cent sales tax measure on the ballot. And yes, we did have community meetings that people could come to on a Saturday, but the community didn't really know too much about our budget challenges. So when I was mayor, I did not vote to put it on the ballot in 2018, but I did say that when I was mayor in 2019, I would ensure that we held budget workshops in every city council district, that we had online surveys, that we used social media to make sure that the community knew about our financial situation in the city of Concord. And then after hearing from people, receiving feedback from a variety of different areas, I felt comfortable putting that on the ballot, and that's the same approach that I would take with policies on the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so here's a twofold question. So I'm going to read it twice. I think the audience wants to see who had their coffee before the forum. The Board of Supervisors recently passed an ordinance for the electrification of new buildings. How would you proceed next to electrify our buildings, an important solution to reduce greenhouse gases and fight climate change? What challenges do you see with electrification of existing buildings, and what solutions would you put in place? I'm going to read that again.
Yeah.
So the audience can also catch that question too. The Board of Supervisors recently passed an ordinance for the electrification of new buildings. How would you proceed next to electrify our buildings, an important solution to reduce greenhouse gases and fight climate change? What challenges do you see with electrification of existing buildings, and what solutions would you put in place? And we'll start with Roxanne.
Okay, so I have done a lot of work in environmental justice, so I appreciate the question. I don't know much about the technology of what the problems would be for electrifying our buildings, and I'm assuming they're meaning county buildings, but I'm not sure. So, you know, I think the problems that could come up is the cost, or the problems that could come up is the time that would need to be taken, or any sort of regulation that would need to be kind of pushed through to make it happen. I think the solutions need to be really partnership, and how we as a county figure out how our department officials, our public works staff can really work together to make it happen. And I do think that we've had partnerships around a lot of other environmental justice issues, and climate change is a existential issue in our county, and we need to solve it.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Deborah.
So the construction industry is rapidly changing, and it needs to. And climate change and the required reductions of greenhouse gases have really sort of driven some of that. I'm not sure what policy this is related to, but I'm thinking it may be related to the elimination of gas connections in housing. It's the only policy I can think of that happened recently. So, you know, again, it's a new way of building things. We're going to phase out things that are harmful to our environment. That's a good thing. But we do have to be cognizant of the cost that then imposes on construction. As I said earlier, you want affordable, it's got to be affordable to build. So every time a new regulation like this is put in place that increases the cost of construction, we are really pricing more people out of housing, or even worse, we may be making it so that projects don't get built because they're unaffordable.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Kenneth.
So in talking to developers and builders, the cost of electrification as opposed to having both gas and electric hookups to your home is not a big deal. As a matter of fact, there's a cost savings in the sense of not having to install a gas meter. Clearly, we need to be conscientious and protective of our environment. So as far as moving towards electrification in all new construction, I think we need to move that direction. The issue you will find is those who prefer to cook with gas over those who prefer the electric stove. However, when it comes to what are we going to do with our existing structures, what happens to all that infrastructure, those gas meters, and everything that's left behind? So no matter how we proceed with the existing structures, we need to be exceptionally cautious. There's going to be a lot of infrastructure still in our grounds. There's still going to be gas meters. Who's going to take care of that, and what's the cost of removing all of that?
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Carlin.
It's my understanding that the county has a facilities assessment underway, and that should be released soon. It's also my understanding that one of the budget challenges is that many of the county's facilities are aging. So I've seen, for example, as I've worked to get more electric vehicle charging stations installed in the city of Concord, especially at Class C apartment buildings, many of which were built in the 1960s, it is very difficult because the building might not be able to handle the load of a charging station or certainly a fast charger. So I would be really curious to see, what the plan is to be able to bring these facilities, fully electrify them. Also, we do know that PG&E does have their hands full with many things, and I hear from business owners all the time that it's taking them 2 years to get hookups from PG&E. So I think that would be a challenge. So I suggest that we talk to one of the sponsors today, IBW Local 302, to see what they suggest as well.
Thank you. All right, next we'll hear from Ed.
I'm on the board of directors of MCE Clean Energy and the executive board representing Concord for the last bunch of years. Electrification, solar, whatever, one of the issues with the electrification is battery storage. And what do we do in order to provide an even flow of electricity at all times? That's the problem. I agree that the issue of removing or not building gas is a way we should go. At the Concord Naval Weapons Station, at the development, I'm opposed to putting in gas lines, except for the area where we may need it for light industrial. It's got to stop. The natural gas uses so much methane that we are hurting our climate. As for the other things, once we start, we just keep going. I have no problem with the gas lines that are existing being empty. Every time I go past San Bruno, I have the reminder of why they shouldn't be there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the next question, actually, let me pause. How are we doing on time? Okay, we're good? You let me know? All right, perfect. All right, so the next question from the audience is, what is your position on implementing a value-based budget for a county funding process? And we'll hear from Deborah first.
Value-based budget. So I'm not really, it's the first time I've actually heard this. We do not do it this way at BART, but I can imagine that it probably but that doesn't mean anything. But I can imagine that it probably means valuing different things on a scoring system and determining budgeting based on that. Look, budgeting always requires, it's one pot of money. It always requires, and there's never enough of it, by the way, in this county, which is why economic development is important to me. But it always requires taking something from one place and moving it to another unless you've got new revenue sources. So if we've got new revenue sources, we can kind of keep going. But if we don't, then we have to go line by line or issue by issue, department by department, and determine what is the value of each of them, what is more important, where do we move money from.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Carlin.
Thank you. Well, 74% of the county's budget is already spoken for. It's already allocated by the feds and the state. So we have to take a look at that. There isn't that much that's left over. With that said, I think that it is important to go out to the community and hear what folks think are important. We in the city of Concord do an annual community survey once every several years. We don't do it every year, but it's helping to inform, for example, right now how we're going to use our ARPA funds and also our budget priorities. So I would be in supportive of doing something like that. And then I also do think the budget oversight committees, including the committee that was formed to make referrals for Measure X, I think that those kind of committees can help to provide important community input as well. Thank you.
All right, well, next we'll hear from Ed.
Well, accounting is not exactly the most exciting, but I'll give you the reality. No matter how you count, if the answer from value-safe budgeting gets you 3 votes, that's what's going to happen. If it supports the things that we want to do, it'll happen. The description of the way we play with our money, the way we put it on our ledgers, is secondary to what we actually want to do. It's not a means. It is something which is used to support the direction that you want to go. So start with the direction you want to go and then figure out how you want to describe it. So that's the story of accounting. And that's from someone who's been in corporate America for 13 years and my own business for 40. It was an old story, which we may not have time, which you start with.
You got that
The answer
right.
is, what number do you want?
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Roxanne.
Yeah, so I think Measure X was a model for this. So if you look at the Measure X principles around funding for that sales tax measure, it had equity-based principles baked in. And we tried to remind the supervisors of that, even though towards the end, I think they forgot what those values-based equity principles were. So I think first, it really does mean something. You have to have a set of principles that drives how the board is looking at its funding. The county is responsible for providing the safety net services for all of our citizens. So from the aged to the young people to our most vulnerable. So, you know, many localities have, as I said before, had people's budgets where you actually heard from the community what the priorities were. And then I think you need to hear from the departments themselves. What are the issues that they are facing as they try to serve foster care children? They are trying to serve people who need health services. So listen to the county departments.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Kenneth.
I would say we already do this in Pleasant Hill. And I don't want to speak for my other council members, but it really is values, morals, and ethics that drive the work we do, and engagement and education with our community. And that's a big part of it. You know, we host goal-setting sessions. We host open budget meetings. We need to. The problem is values can be a little subjective. Your priority might be a little different than mine and or your neighbors, and it's having an open and compassionate and thoughtful conversation. We live in a very divisive society these last few years, and how do we bridge that gap? And we need to in order to have these conversations, because it might not be you get exactly what you expect, but your voice matters and your thoughts matter, and they need to be brought forward, and they need to be a part of the process. The issue is yes, how do we bring that engagement forward? And I will say the one good thing out of the pandemic is Zoom. It has brought more community engagement, and maybe we just go that way a lot more.
Thank you.
Missed the cue.
I did. My bad. All right. Next, we're going to go to Kenneth. Or, sorry, my bad.
I'll talk again if you need.
No. I apologize. I got distracted. Sorry. I have one last question. Okay. And so here we go. Is there anything you think county supervisors should not be involved in? I'll ask that question again. Give you guys some time. Is there anything you think county supervisors should not be involved in? Oh, there you go.
Who's elected winner?
We'll start with Ed.
Kenneth, no.
Gee, I'm kind of tempted to say religion, sex, and politics. You know? I mean, that was my advice from my mother. You know, it hasn't gotten us that far. Actually, the things that they really need to stay away from is, quite frankly, making decisions before hearing from the people. And this is quite serious. One of the classic issues, and I have a lot of problems at times with the Brown Act, but one of the most important aspects is you never vote and make a final decision until you hear from the public. This is the one thing that we need to do. This is one thing that all elected officials, and quite frankly, all of us at times have a lot of difficulty because we say, we want to do this, we want to do this. But you can't make a final decision until after that public comment. And that's something that you need to do.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Kenneth.
Yeah, you caught me off guard with this one. So what I would say is the county discussion, or your discussions of the county should not be involved in your holiday dinners, family gatherings. There really is so many things. What goes on in your home is yours to have. Like I say, you caught me off guard with this one, because we need to take care of our community, and we need to focus on our community, and we need to protect our community. And that doesn't mean we're overreaching, and we should delve into those areas of your business, your life, your property rights, those types of things, unduly and inappropriately. And I'm very cautious about that when I think of personal property rights and home ownership and those types of things. So that's where I'm just going to leave it, because, like I say, you got me.
All right. Well, thank you. Next, we'll hear from Deborah.
Well, supervisors are involved in so much. It's such a broad job. We've only scratched the surface here. I would actually agree with one component of Eddie's answer, and that's politics. I'm the only truly nonpartisan person here, not affiliated with a political party. And I think that the county's Board of Supervisors is a nonpartisan seat, and that the political parties, they should not be involved in the political parties. Now, that's not ever going to happen. I get it. So I'm going to just say that we expect that our county supervisor is going to serve with the utmost of ethics, and that they would not be engaged in influencing things that we should allow law enforcement or the district attorney's office to handle, grand juries, things like that. I would hope that, I know I would be staying out of those things as a county supervisor. And I think it's really about ethics that is needed for this office.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Carlin.
So I think that members of the Board of Supervisors should not be involved with making uninformed, unethical decisions. So it's really important before making a policy decision to hear, like we just talked about, from the community, from department heads, from workers themselves, since the county is only as strong and able to support services to the level that their county employees are able to manage their workloads and provide those services. I think it's also important too to take a look, and there are districts, and so just like in the city of Concord, we work hard to ensure that every Concord resident receives service and fast follow-up, but also being respectful. I think at the Board of Supervisors, there are projects that might be region sensitive, so not stepping into someone else's lane and someone else's district without, again, getting that feedback, and then also, understanding the position of the supervisor who's directly responsible to the voters.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Roxanne.
So I was in the presence of our beloved former Congressman George Miller last weekend, and I had a great conversation with him. And one of the things we talked about was supervisors should be out in their communities. They should be talking to their constituents, right? They shouldn't just rely on public comment. They shouldn't just rely on emails. They should actually be out in their communities, shaking hands, talking to people as they water their lawns. And that should be part of what they think about when they're on that bench. The second thing I would say is special interests and discussions behind the scenes. We often have this feeling when we go to the board meetings that the decisions that have been made behind closed doors between them, the CAO's office maybe, and maybe a few other folks in departments, but not the people. And so there really should be a concerted effort on behalf of the board to make sure that they aren't looking at special interests and how they make their decisions, but they listen to the people. And to do that, you have to be in the district. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, I apologize if I didn't ask you your question. There were too many questions for the time, but I encourage you to stay for the reception to ask your question or continue the conversation. So next, each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to conclude. The order is the reverse of their opening remarks. And so we will start with Carlin.
So thanks again for the opportunity to join you for this important conversation today. And, I think that it's very clear that the pandemic has shown that families and government alike has really struggled. And so it's really important to have someone on the Board of Supervisors, someone like myself, who serves in a leadership role at the biggest city, not just in District 4, but at the county level. And so, as a council member, I've ensured we've allocated more funding to improve our roads, ensured a balanced budget, beautified our parks, created 2 small business grant programs to get our small businesses through the pandemic and emerge stronger on the other side, grown more local living wage jobs, and also ensured that our police department has the tools it needs, like drones, license plate readers, and cameras to keep the community safe. And I believe in regional collaboration. That's why I've worked to put together the Diablo Valley Tech Initiative, serve on the East Bay Economic Development Alliance, and have co-authored East Bay Forward, a strategic plan to get us through economically the pandemic. And also, I think that those are the kinds of approaches that a supervisor needs to take. And so I look forward to serving as your next supervisor. And one of the first things I'm going to do is follow along the footsteps of what we've just done with the Miles Hall Community Crisis Hub and bring together public safety, nonprofits, cities, counties, behavioral health, public health, and the private sector to address our most difficult challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Deborah.
Thank you. Our counties face many challenges. We just scratched the surface here today, and I wish I had more time to talk about individually. But our county needs a leader with experience, with a broad experience, and that's why I'm running. I have a long history of stepping up to tackle really hard jobs, and both in my career and public service. But let's look at my resume, and it just shows you. I started my career at KPMG, one of the largest accounting firms in the world. That was really tough in the 1980s as a young 24-year-old. Then at senior financial management positions in the construction industry, where it's difficult for women to actually rise to the top even today still. 6 years on this county's pension board, going back and forth between labor and county supervisors over who should pay more of the county pension cost. And my last 5 years as a board director at San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit. Wow, you all know how hard that is. I stepped up to do those jobs, and I'm stepping up to do this job too. I'm not afraid to ask, why are we doing that? And that's what we need at the county level. Contra Costa needs strong advocates representing county interests and addressing regional Bay Area problems. Karen Mitchoff has been a shining example for that, and we need to make sure her replacement is too. Thank you to all the organizations. I hope we can count on your support.
Thank you. So next we'll hear from Kenneth.
Again, thank you to the East Bay Leadership Council, to the League of Women Voters, and the chambers that brought this all together. I'm really grateful to be here with you. The Board of Supervisors needs a worker, and I'm that worker. I've devoted over 30 plus years of my life to public service, 29 as a police officer, 10 as a city council member here in Pleasant Hill. I have a reputation as a worker. I have a reputation as a consensus builder. I am endorsed by almost every elected within the district, whether that's the Walnut Creek City Council, the Pleasant Hill City Council, 2 from the Concord City Council, and others from the Clayton City Council, because I'm known to collaborate, work, and build partnerships. And that's what we need to do, whether that's with our building industry, our workers, or our nonprofit community. We all play a part, and we all need to work on this together. I am just proud of the successes that we've had here in Pleasant Hill. We're a small town. We have a small budget, but we've worked diligently and hard to provide the services for our community, and we've been exceptionally successful, as well as establishing a $10 million reserve, which for our budget of $30 million is a significant reserve to protect the stability of our community. Oh, on top of that, we've managed to provide housing, whether it's affordable housing, low-income senior housing, and then the crowning glory will be our opening of our new net zero state-of-the-art library that everyone in this district, let alone this county, will have access to and enjoy, and it will be open to all. Again, I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Roxanne.
So some have asked me, why are you running? I decided to run after a conversation with my husband on our couch. My husband, Jaime, said to me, I've seen you work so hard in the years, both with the county health department and as director of Healthy Contra Costa. You've worked hard to make sure that the community's at the table and led efforts to change county policy. If you really want to make a greater impact, you need to run for District 4 Supervisor. Instead of your 2-minute public comment, you can actually lead policy discussions. And I've made the decision to rise to the moment and run for Supervisor District 4 to represent all the residents who deserve to be recognized in all the facets of their lives. whether they are young adults or working families or our elderly residents. I describe myself as a public servant who takes action to realize the values of our community. I'll do that through my leadership to advance inclusive participation in the areas affecting our lives in health, housing, public safety, education, environmental impacts, and economic mobility. In closing, I want to honor Cesar Chavez's birthday today. I'm proud that California recognized his leadership as a state holiday. And I'd like to share one of his quotes that describes the importance of humanity and inclusiveness. Quote, we cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about the progress and prosperity of our community. Thank you for actively engaging with us tonight. I ask for your support in my historic District 4 run, and I welcome your participation in helping advance our communities as we move forward in the county. Thank you.
All right. We'll next hear from Ed.
Thank you. I have had a lifetime of proven leadership, including some of the most difficult places in the world, as well as on some of the more difficult topics that we've had to decide. We've gone through a lot of political posturing and deflection tonight, and I thank you all for going through it. And one of the things I bring is a lack of tolerance for it. This is what we need in the Board of Supervisors. We don't need continuation of the status quo and the biggest collection of people saying, oh yeah, we're all here. We don't need excuses on what we did in the past. What we need is challenges of what we have. The world is a dangerous place. We don't go forward unless you have to be able to go through the obstacles, not necessarily always around them. That's who I am. That's what I want to do. Government is either listening to you or listening to someone else. We've all seen that. It's a truism. I've written it in stone at Todos Santos. I will not only listen to you, I may not agree, but will listen and will make sure that everyone is heard, including the voices of the past, which we have ignored, and for which we are suffering now in the inequities of our society.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so these are your 5 candidates for Contra Costa District 4 Supervisor. Let's give them a hand.
Congratulations. We survived.
I have a few things to say, and then I'll hand it over for final remarks by Mark Hughes. So again, thank you all for attending tonight's forum. For more voting information, go to our voter service website at www.votersedge.org. Candidates have had the opportunity to state their campaign issues and add a link to their website. I want to thank our co-sponsors, Contra Costa County Industrial Association, East Bay Leadership Council, Concord Chamber of Commerce, Pleasant Hill Chamber of Commerce, and the Walnut Creek Chamber of Commerce. And I especially want to thank your candidates who have offered their service, their ideas, and commitment. And I want to thank you, the audience, for attending, engaging, and making it possible for democracy to work. So next up, we'll hear from Mark Hughes, Executive Director, Industrial Association of Contra Costa County.
Good evening. Thank you, Stephanie. You know, it occurred to me as I was greeting people as I entered the room today that there were too many people that until this evening I had only met and talked to on a computer screen. Isn't that crazy? Is it nice to be back at an in-person event again? Hopefully we'll be able to continue this. So on behalf of the East Bay Leadership Council, the League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley, the Chambers of Commerce of Concord, Pleasant Hill, Walnut Creek, and the Industrial Association of Contra Costa County. I want to first of all, again, thank our candidates tonight. Thank you for joining us, taking the time out of your campaign, answering our questions, giving us a better idea of what your thoughts and ideas and positions are on various issues. And we wish you all the very best of luck for the remainder of the campaign. So thank you. I also want to thank our moderator, Stephanie. Didn't she do a great job? It's a tough task, especially with 5 candidates, over 100 people, lots of questions, trying to make sure you're fair, and you did a terrific job. Thank you, Stephanie. I want to also once again recognize our sponsors today. And I know Kristin did it early on, but it's worth doing again because events like this don't happen a lot of times without the sponsorship support. And so very, very grateful and blessed that we have so many companies and organizations willing to step up. So I'm going to recognize them again. First is WISPA, Western States Petroleum Association. And I know Bob Brown is here, and I thought Kevin Buchan was here. Thank you so much. We have the Building Industry Association, Bay Area, Bob Glover and Lisa Vorderbruggen. IBW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Tom Hansen. Contra Costa Association of Realtors, and I'll tell you, they are here in force tonight. There is probably 10 or so. Thank you all, especially Heather Schiffman, for helping to sponsor this. And then the Martinez Refining Company, and I know Brandon Matson is here with us. So again, thank you to the sponsors. It means a lot to us. We really, really do appreciate it. And finally, I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your schedules to be here. I think it's a terrific turnout, and I think it's just an indication of how important this election is. So thanks for taking the time. Hopefully you got a little bit more information, got to know the candidates a little bit better, and the good thing is that you're going to be able to get to know them maybe more on a one-on-one session in just a few minutes at our reception. I do want to recognize one other person, Jimmy Ponder, who is with Ponder Environmental, and he is our sponsor here at the Contra Costa Country Club. So he made it possible to have the event here, which was very, very important. So again, you're going to have some time during the reception. The reception is going to be held on the patio outside here. It's a beautiful day out there. If some of you get a little chilly, there is a bar in here, and we'll have some appetizers that are passed around. So again, thanks so much. I'm the only thing standing between you and a cocktail right now, right? So with that, we will adjourn. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.